James Morrison had one rule when he bought the Montana cabin: nobody would ever find it. It was remote, unlisted, invisible to anyone without the exact coordinates. It was safety, silence, distance from everything that had nearly killed him. So when he pushed open the door after 6 months away and heard children laughing inside, his heartbeat stuttered, the first warning that something was very, very wrong. Snow clung heavily to his coat as he stepped out of the SUV, boots sinking into the frost-packed ground. His eyes narrowed. The old wooden gate, originally gray, weather-stripped, and ugly, was painted a bright leafy green. His gate, painted by someone else. He shoved it open and marched toward the porch. The cabin looked alive in a way it never had. Flower pots, neatly stacked firewood, a small toy truck half buried in snow. What the hell? He flung the cabin door open. A young woman froze mid-step, clutching a basket of laundry. Her dark hair spilled around her shoulders in loose waves, her eyes widening with a fear so real it felt like a shock wave through the room. A baby rested against her hip, and 2 little boys, twins, peeked from behind her legs. James's voice was ice. "Why are you in my house?" The woman swallowed hard. Please don't call the police. I can explain." The older twin, taller, sharper eyes, stepped forward slightly, as if trying to shield the younger one. Protective reflex. His twin clutched a small notepad smeared with crayon, knuckles tight, like he wanted to draw but couldn't. "Mommy," the protective one whispered, "did we do something wrong?" "No," she whispered shakily. "No, sweetheart." James didn't soften. "You can't be here." "Who are you?" "My name is Elena," she said. "Elena Morales. And I'm sorry. I truly am. I thought this place was abandoned. We had nowhere else to go." "That's not an answer." His hand slipped into his pocket, fingers brushing the edge of his phone. "You can't just break into." "My husband died," she blurted, voice cracking. After that, everything fell apart. The artistic twin looked up at her, eyes full of fear. "Mommy, are we going to live on the street again?" The sentence hit James like a punch to the ribs. The child wasn't dramatic. He was remembering, revisiting something scarred into him. James drew a slow breath, thumb hovering over the screen of his phone. Before he could make the call, another call came in, loud, buzzing, insistent. "Dr. Sarah Chun." He answered sharply. "What is it?" Her voice was clipped, professional. "Your heart monitor flagged irregular spikes again. Are you under stress?" He glared around the occupied cabin. "You could say that." "James, listen to me carefully." Her tone sharpened. "Your heart can't take another major stress event. Keep yourself calm. Avoid confrontation. Choose peace. Choose peace." In front of him stood a trembling mother holding a baby. 2 frightened children. A warm cabin that had clearly been cared for, not trashed. Peace. When he hung up, his pulse was still too loud, but his voice was steadier. 12 days, he said. "You can stay for 12 days. After that, you leave." Elena sagged with relief, tears slipping silently. "Thank you. Thank you so much. We'll stay out of your way. I'll be staying here too," he added, "to make sure nothing changes." "Before we continue, I want to know, what's your name, and where are you watching this from? Drop a comment below. I love hearing from you. And if you're new here, welcome. You're about to witness something unforgettable, as if things hadn't already changed the moment he walked in. Before she could reply, the door burst open and a gust of icy wind blew through. Thomas Wright stepped in, 63, tall, weather-tough, carrying a bag of groceries and a grin that always arrived before he did. "Oh," Thomas said, stopping mid-stride. "Well, this is awkward." Elena rubbed her forehead. "Thomas, this is the owner." "Oh." Thomas's eyebrows shot upward. Then he looked between them slowly, grin creeping back. "Ah, so the long-distance boyfriend finally shows up." James stiffened. "What?" Elena went crimson. "No, he's not. We're not." "Oh, my mistake." Thomas rubbed his chin. Though the tension makes more sense now. James stared, speechless. Elena buried her face in her hands. The twins giggled like they'd just watched the best comedy in the world. As Thomas backed out the door with an apologetic laugh, James exhaled through his teeth. This was already spiraling into something he didn't understand, and didn't want to understand. The next morning, he followed the smell of food into the kitchen and stopped in the doorway. A full breakfast waited on the table. Eggs, potatoes, fresh biscuits. Exactly how he liked them. Elena turned, startled. "Good morning. I, I found your recipe book and your allergy kit. I didn't want to cook anything unsafe." He sat slowly, cautiously. "You didn't have to." "I know," she whispered, "but I wanted to." Then she called gently across the room. "Daniel, Lucas, breakfast." The artistic twin walked in holding a sketchbook, fingers stained with bright crayon streaks. The protective twin walked in first, subtly placing himself between his mother and James, like he wasn't sure yet if the stranger could be trusted. Daniel held up a drawing proudly. "Look, I drew you." James stared at the paper. A towering giant with thick eyebrows. Angry expression. A tiny cabin beside him. "I look angry," James muttered. Daniel shrugged. "You kind of were." Lucas elbowed his brother gently. "But he made you strong-looking too." James felt a reluctant laugh escape him. Later that day, Thomas leaned against the fence with a knowing smirk. She planted that whole garden herself, while raising 3 kids alone. Tough woman, that one. James knelt beside the tomato vines, tracing the healthy leaves. "For months," she said. "She's a worker," Thomas replied. "Money doesn't plant tomatoes. Heart does." The word stuck to James longer than he liked. That afternoon, Dr. Chin arrived unannounced, coat wrapped tight, clipboard in hand. She scanned the cabin. Clean, organized, warm. Children's shoes lined neatly. A sense of peace the house had never known under James's ownership. She studied him closely. "Your pulse is calmer than it was in months. Whatever's happening here, it's good for you." He avoided her eyes. "It's temporary." She didn't argue. She didn't need to. The next day shattered whatever calm he'd begun to accept. A black Mercedes pulled into the driveway, kicking up snow and gravel. The door swung open sharply, and Victoria Ashford stepped out, every inch the polished executive. Expensive coat, hair perfectly pinned, face set in controlled irritation. She approached the porch, taking in the mismatched boots, the children's toys, the potted plants. Confusion flickered across her face, then judgment. "James." She stopped beside him, voice low and tight. "You disappeared. Investors are panicking. You're ignoring every call. What is going on?" Her eyes flicked to Elena, who stood in the doorway holding Sophia. A subtle tightening of Victoria's jaw. Not disgust, worse. Dismissal. "And who is this?" she asked flatly. James stepped slightly in front of Elena. "A guest. A guest," Victoria repeated softly, like she had just realized something important about the man she thought she understood. "I see." She motioned toward the cabin. "Can we speak privately?" They stepped a few paces away. "James," she said, lowering her voice. "This isn't like you. You don't hide from responsibility. You don't run from crises. I'm not running. You're living off-grid with strangers while your company is drowning." Her tone didn't rise. It sharpened. "When did you become someone who walks away?" "When I survived something that should have killed me," he said calmly. "Things look different after that." She studied him carefully. "Is this about them?" Her gaze flicked back toward the cabin. Not cruel, not dramatic, just questioning. "No," he said. "It's about me." "Then make a decision." She handed him a folder. "We have a buyer. They want your final word." He didn't open it. "I've already given it," he said quietly. "Sell." Victoria froze, breath catching in disbelief. "James, are you sure?" "Yes." She swallowed her frustration. "Then I hope this retreat is worth what you're letting go." He didn't respond. She left without another word. If you're feeling the emotion in this story, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We share incredible true stories like this every week, and I don't want you to miss what happens next. Trust me, you'll want to stay for the ending. From the porch, Elena watched with wide, guilty eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered when he returned. "I didn't mean to affect your life like this." "You didn't," he said. But she didn't believe him. That night, James walked past the kitchen and heard soft crying. He found Elena at the table, surrounded by bills, pay stubs, and scribbled numbers. "What's wrong?" he asked. She tried to hide the papers. "Nothing. Just budgeting." Let me see. She resisted, then relented. He saw everything. Rent she couldn't afford. Debt she couldn't escape. A small apartment she was trying to secure, but the numbers didn't come close. Her voice broke. I have to leave. For your sake. For ours. He looked at her. At the exhaustion in her eyes. The weight she carried alone. And he felt something shift inside him. Quiet. Certain. Unstoppable. He didn't want her 12 days to end. Not now. Not ever. The next morning, sunlight crept across the cabin floors in soft golden streaks, but the mood inside felt muted, heavy with the unspoken. James awakened with the lingering echo of Elena's whispered words from the night before. I have to leave. For your sake. For ours. He didn't know how to fix her fear yet, but he knew he wasn't letting her slip away without trying. Downstairs, he found Daniel sitting cross-legged on the floor, sketchbook open, crayons scattered everywhere. The boy looked up, dark eyes thoughtful, already lost in another world he created with lines and colors. What are you drawing today? James asked. Daniel held the book up shyly. A cabin, surrounded by trees. A garden. A sun too big for the sky. And 5 small figures, all holding hands. James's chest tightened. That's really good. Daniel's cheeks flushed with pride. I want to be an artist. Mommy says I see things in big feelings. You do, James said softly. You really do. Lucas entered a moment later, clutching a stuffed animal, a worn, fuzzy bear with one button eye. He stood protectively in front of Daniel, as if checking whether James was safe before letting himself relax. Are we having breakfast? Lucas asked, peering around the room. Not yet, James said. Your mom's still upstairs. Lucas nodded and leaned against the doorframe, watching like a little guardian assigned to monitor every shift in the room. Elena came down slowly, favoring her ankle again. She greeted them with a tired smile that didn't reach her eyes. James moved instinctively toward her. How's your ankle? It'll be fine, she said gently. Thank you. He wanted to say more, to reach out, to pull all her burdens into his own hands. But she moved past him with careful neutrality that cut deep. Midday arrived with weak winter light, and Elena stepped outside to make a phone call. James didn't mean to overhear. He was fixing a loose porch rail, but her voice, taut with desperation, carried through the cold air. Please, sir. I can pay the deposit by the end of the month, she pleaded into the phone. I promise. I have steady work prospects now. My kids are quiet. We won't cause trouble. The landlord's voice crackled harshly through the phone, loud enough for James to hear. Ma'am, we've been over this. 3 kids, no co-signer, uneven job history. No landlord will take that risk. You're wasting my time. Elena's voice wavered. But we just need a chance. No, I'm not discussing this again. The call ended abruptly. Elena lowered the phone slowly, shoulders trembling as she stared at the ground. She wiped her eyes quickly when she sensed movement behind her. I'm fine, she whispered automatically, not even looking at James. You're not, he said quietly. She didn't respond. She just slipped back inside, moving like someone trying to outrun her own exhaustion. That evening, as the cold deepened, James stepped out to bring firewood inside. On the porch, he found a stack already neatly arranged by the door. Behind it stood a small figure. Lucas. The little boy was bundled in an oversized jacket, pushing a final log into place with serious concentration. You did all this? James asked. Lucas nodded. Mommy's tired. So I help. James swallowed, overwhelmed by how much weight sat on such young shoulders. Lucas clutched his stuffed bear and added, voice small. I like when Mommy smiles. She doesn't smile a lot anymore. James crouched to meet his eyes. I want her to smile too. Lucas studied him with a maturity no 6-year-old should have. Are you going to leave when we leave? James hesitated. What do you think? Lucas hugged the bear tightly. I hope you don't. Inside, warmth returned to the cabin in flickers, the laughter of the twins during a board game. Elena humming softly as she folded laundry, Sophia toddling around on unsteady legs. But the tension remained like a quiet thread, tying everything together with unspoken fear. That night, disaster struck. Elena's foot slipped while carrying a pot of warm water. She gasped as pain shot through her ankle, collapsing into a chair. James rushed to her immediately. "Sit," he said firmly. "I'll handle dinner." "You don't have to," she started. "I want to," he said, with a finality that surprised even himself. He grabbed an apron. The kitchen fell into chaos almost instantly. He burned the rice, again. A pot overflowed. Sophia wailed endlessly whenever he walked away. Daniel tried helping, but ended up with flour all over his face. Lucas attempted to calm Sophia, but tripped over a chair, sending a cascade of wooden spoons clattering across the floor. "This is not human," James muttered, staring at the smoking pot. Elena burst into laughter, a sound he hadn't heard genuinely from her in days. "Welcome to my life." Daniel wiped flour from his cheek. "Uncle Jim, you're really bad at cooking." Lucas elbowed him softly. "But he's trying." James shot the twins a mock glare. "I'm right here." He caught Elena's gaze. Something warm flickered between them. Comfort, affection, something unspoken and growing by the minute. Later, Thomas arrived with dinner to save them from starvation, as he put it. After the children finished eating and ran off, Thomas leaned against the counter, studying James with the accuracy of a man who'd lived long enough to read every human emotion like a map. "You're in love," Thomas said plainly. James nearly dropped a fork. "What? No. Oh, please." Thomas waved him off. "I've been watching you stare at her like a man who finally found the missing chapter of his story." James rubbed the back of his neck. "She's been through so much. I don't want to add more pressure." Thomas scoffed. "She doesn't need pressure, boy. She needs someone who stays." Silence settled over them as Elena's voice drifted from the living room, soft, soothing, singing a lullaby to Sophia. Thomas placed a hand on James's shoulder. "The right love doesn't demand anything. It grows quietly, but you have to open the door for it." James swallowed. "I want her to stay." "Then tell her," Thomas said simply, "or you'll regret it." Later that night, as Elena took the twins upstairs, James went to fetch an extra blanket for her. In the dim light of the bedroom, he nudged a small leather-bound book off the shelf accidentally. It fell open on the floor, pages splayed. Her journal. He shouldn't look. He knew that. But he saw her handwriting, slanted, earnest, fragile, and something pulled him in before he could stop it. "Mary is happy here, but it won't last. Robert was kind today, kinder than he should be. I think I'm falling for him. Absurd. Crazy. He deserves better than a burden like me." His breath hitched. Then he read the line that hollowed him out. "If he asks us to leave, I won't blame him. People like him don't choose people like me." The door creaked. Elena stood there, frozen. Her eyes widened when she saw the journal open in his hands. "You had no right," she whispered. Not angry, hurt. Deeply, deeply hurt. "I know," he said, voice unsteady. "But Elena, you read my private thoughts." Her voice trembled. "Why would you do that?" "I needed to understand," he said helplessly. "You weren't telling me what you truly felt." "Because it doesn't matter," she said, taking a shaky step back. "Because I can't stay, James. You have a life. A legacy. I'm just surviving." He stepped forward. "You're not a burden." She shook her head. "You don't know what you're saying." "Elena," he said, voice breaking, "I feel the same way. I'm falling for you." Her breath stopped. "How?" she whispered. "How can you fall in love with someone like me?" "In a week. When I wake up, I look for you. When Sophia laughs, I feel something I don't know how to describe. When you smile, everything feels right. And when you talk about leaving," his voice shook. "It feels like losing something I just found." A tear slipped down her cheek. "James, I can't lose again. I can't fall apart again. So don't do it alone," he whispered. For a moment, she leaned toward him, soft, willing, breaking open. Then she closed her eyes. "It's better if we leave," she whispered. His heart fractured. "Elena, I'm sorry." She left the room before he could stop her. "I need to know, what would you do in James's position? Would you let her walk away, or would you fight for her? Drop your answer in the comments. I'm reading every single one." And James stood there in the half-light, holding her journal like a wound he had inflicted himself. He didn't sleep that night. Near dawn, when the sky carried the faint gray blush of approaching light, he stepped onto the porch alone. Exhaustion sat heavy on him. Silence pressed into his ears. For the first time in years, he let himself break. He lowered his head into his hands. And he cried. Silent, shaking grief. Fear. Helplessness. The unbearable ache of almost having something precious and losing it before he could even hold it properly. He sat there until the sun began to rise, until the cold bit through his coat, until he could force himself to stand again. He didn't know it yet, but everything was about to crack wide open, because within hours, Elena would try to leave, and fate would force them into the darkest night of their lives. Before sunrise, the cabin was a blur of shadows and pale blue light when James heard the faint rustling of bags. His body reacted before his mind fully woke. He pushed out of bed and moved through the hallway barefoot, heart already tightening with dread. At the front door, Elena slipped into her coat quietly, her movements rushed but deliberate. Daniel clutched his sketchbook, eyes downcast. Lucas hugged his stuffed bear tightly, standing close to Elena as if shielding her from a world that had taken too much already. A taxi idled outside, headlights cutting through the misty dawn like sharp, white blades. She was really leaving. Elena, James said, voice cracking. Don't. She flinched, turning slowly. Tears clung to her lashes. James, please. You weren't supposed to wake up. You were going to disappear? His voice came out harsher than intended, desperation pushing through the cracks. Her breath trembled. I thought it would be easier. For who? Not for me. He stepped closer, fighting the rising panic. You don't have to leave. I do. Her voice was small, strangled. You shouldn't have to carry us. You shouldn't. Lucas coughed suddenly. A small cough at first, nothing alarming. But then his knees buckled slightly, and he let out a second cough. Deeper, wetter, sharp enough to slice the moment in two. Elena's head snapped toward him instantly. Lucas. The boy swayed, clutching his chest. Mommy, it hurts. James moved before she did. He scooped Lucas into his arms and felt the heat radiating off his skin. Wrong, frightening heat. The boy's forehead glistened with sudden perspiration. His breaths came fast and shallow. James's heart lurched. Elena, he said, voice low with urgency. We need to get him inside. Now. She froze, completely. Her face drained of color. Her eyes widened with a terror so deep it made her look hollow. She wasn't just scared. She was reliving something. Miguel. The night he died. The emergency. The helplessness. The moment everything collapsed. Her body locked. Her breath hitched. She didn't move. James tightened his grip on Lucas and barked her name sharply, not out of anger, but to snap her out of the trauma. Elena. Move. She jolted back into herself and stumbled forward, hands trembling violently. Together they rushed inside, laying Lucas on the couch. James grabbed his phone, 0 bars. The storm clouds were rolling in too thick and early for the season. I'll get the midwife, he said, already running for his boots. The wind hit him like a wall the moment he stepped outside, fierce, icy, carrying the scent of snow and danger. He sprinted across the yard, slipping, catching himself, shouting into the gray morning until Thomas appeared from the neighboring path, breath misting in the air. What's wrong? Thomas demanded. Lucas, James panted. High fever, trouble breathing. Thomas turned without another word. I'll get her. Go. Within minutes, the village midwife arrived, small, sharp-eyed, carrying a worn leather bag. She knelt beside Lucas, checking his pulse, his chest, the heat radiating off him. He's burning up, she murmured. Could be pneumonia. Elena staggered forward. We can take him to the hospital. No. The midwife said firmly without looking up. Roads are blocked. Storm's coming in fast. A violent gust shook the cabin walls as if to confirm her words. Elena's breathing quickened. Please, please, help him. We'll do what we can, the midwife said gently. But we don't have the antibiotics he needs. As if summoned by fate itself, the lights flickered once, twice, then died. Darkness swelled through the cabin. Sophia began to cry. Daniel clutched his sketchbook, eyes wide with fear. Elena gasped, panic rising fast and uncontrollable. No, not now, she whispered, voice breaking. James sprang into action. I'll find the flashlights. He tore through drawers, cabinets, boxes until he found 2 working lanterns and a flashlight. Their dim glow pushed back the dark just enough to see Lucas's flushed, trembling form. Lucas whimpered, "Daddy, Daddy, where are you?" The sound gutted Elena. She collapsed beside him, stroking his hair with shaking fingers. "Baby, Mommy's here. Stay with me. Please stay with me." Lucas coughed suddenly, a violent, wrenching cough that turned into choking. Elena froze completely again. No breath, no movement, just terror. James shoved past the paralysis, lifting Lucas immediately and turning him onto his side, supporting the boy's back with steady, controlled hands. "It's okay, buddy. Breathe. Let it out. I've got you," he murmured, calm in a way he hadn't known he could be. The midwife guided his hand placement, but he didn't hesitate, not once. Daniel cried softly, whispering, "Please be okay. Please be okay." While Lucas coughed so hard his tiny body convulsed. A sudden drip of water hit James's shoulder. He looked up. The roof was leaking. The storm was ripping through the old wood. Another drop fell. Then another. Soon a steady stream dripped onto the blankets. James cursed under his breath and moved Lucas further from the leak, while Elena finally broke out of her paralysis, sobbing openly now. "I can't lose him," she cried. "I can't lose anyone else." Her voice shattered. Her hands trembled uncontrollably. She wasn't seeing the present. She was seeing Miguel dying in her arms, helpless, terrified. James grabbed her face gently, forcing her eyes to meet his. "Elena, look at me." She struggled to focus. "You're not losing him," he said, voice fierce and trembling. "Not tonight. Not while I'm here. We do this together. Do you hear me?" Her breath shook violently, but she nodded. Just barely. Together they pressed cool cloths to Lucas's forehead, kept his small body upright, whispered reassurances even as the storm roared outside and rain slipped through every weakness in the roof. Hours dragged like years. Blow after blow. The fever climbed. The storm worsened. The power remained dead. The cabin grew colder. Lucas's breathing turned more shallow. At one point, the boy whimpered, "Mommy, help." Elena broke again, folding over his body, her sobs shaking him. "I'm here, baby. I'm here. Please stay with me." James wrapped his arms around both of them. He held Elena as her breath stuttered. He held Lucas as the fever raged. He held the family he didn't even know he'd been searching for, refusing to let go. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, Lucas went still. Too still. Elena choked a sob so raw it sounded like breaking glass. "No, no, no, no." Then, softly, Lucas breathed. Slow, weak, but steady. The fever had broken. The midwife wiped her eyes discreetly. "He's through the worst." Elena collapsed onto her hands, trembling with relief so violent she nearly fainted. James pulled her into his chest, holding her as her body shook with exhausted sobs. Finally, hours later, Lucas opened his eyes. They were glassy but focused. "Mommy," he whispered. Elena cupped his face with both hands, tears falling freely. "Yes, baby. I'm right here." Lucas swallowed weakly. "I dreamed." James brushed sweat-matted hair from the boy's forehead. "What did you dream about, buddy?" Lucas blinked slowly. "Daddy came." Elena froze. He was smiling. Lucas continued. "He said he's happy in heaven." Elena's chest crumpled, tears spilling silently. Lucas turned his head toward James. He said, "It's okay for Uncle Jim to take care of us now." Elena covered her mouth with both hands, a broken sound escaping her. James's throat tightened painfully. He smoothed the blanket over Lucas's small frame. "Your daddy loved you very much." "I know," Lucas whispered. "But you're here now." Elena looked up, eyes swimming. Something shifted permanently in the space between them. An understanding. A tether. A truth neither could run from anymore. Elena leaned toward him, voice trembling. "Kiss me." And he did. Softly, carefully, like she was something precious he could finally touch without fear of breaking. If this moment just hit you in the heart, do me a favor, tap that like button. And if you know someone who needs to hear this story, share it with them. Sometimes we all need a reminder that love can find us in the most unexpected places. Around them, the storm quieted. The world finally breathed again. By dawn, the crisis had passed. Lucas slept peacefully. Daniel had curled up beside him, sketchbook still in hand. Sophia lay in Elena's arms, finally calm. The sky outside softened into gold. James stepped quietly onto the porch, watching the sunrise break open across the mountains. And for the first time in years, he felt like he had survived something emotionally, not just physically. But more than that, he felt like he had finally found something worth surviving for. The storm had thinned by sunrise, leaving the world washed and quiet, the snow glimmering under soft golden light. The cabin felt different, lighter, as if the walls themselves had exhaled after a night of holding too much. James stepped inside to find Elena on the couch, cradling Sophia gently while watching Lucas sleep. Her hair was messy, her eyes swollen from crying, her skin pale with exhaustion, but something in her expression had shifted. The fear wasn't gone, but it no longer ruled her face. She looked like someone standing on the edge of a new beginning, terrified but ready. He approached slowly, not wanting to break the moment. She looked up, and their eyes held. No running. No apologies. No walls. She exhaled shakily. "I'm staying." The words were soft but steady. "I'm terrified," she whispered, as if confessing something sacred. Terrified of losing again. Terrified of leaning on someone. Terrified of what this means. Her fingers brushed Sophia's hair as she swallowed hard. "But last night, I realized that staying scared won't keep my children safe. It won't keep me from hurting. It won't fix anything. It just keeps me alone." James sat beside her, heart thudding. "And now?" She met his gaze with trembling courage. "Now I want to try? With you." He let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "I love you," he said, voice breaking. "I'm in love with you, Elena." A tear slid down her cheek, but she smiled. A soft, trembling smile that made something inside him unravel completely. "I know." Before either of them could say more, the front door swung open and Thomas walked in carrying a tray full of food. "Breakfast," he announced triumphantly, then stopped mid-step when he saw them sitting close, fingers barely touching. Finally, he shouted to the empty room behind him. "Told the universe I'd retire when you two stopped being idiots." Elena buried her face in her hands, laughing. James shook his head, but even he couldn't stop the smile tugging at his lips. Throughout the morning, the cabin hummed with gentle warmth. Lucas regained strength. Daniel showed him drawings he'd made while staying at his bedside, and Sophia toddled around with new bravery, squealing whenever Thomas pretended to chase her. But the peace didn't last long. James's phone buzzed again. Victoria. He almost ignored it. Almost. But he needed closure. He stepped outside into the crisp morning air and answered. "James," she said without greeting. "The sale is ready. The documents need your confirmation." "I understand," he said. There was a pause, subtle but heavy. "Are you certain this is what you want? Because once it's done, there's no going back." He looked through the cabin window. Elena brushing Daniel's hair from his forehead, Lucas showing Thomas a new drawing, Sophia trying to steal a biscuit bigger than her face. A life forming, a home building itself around him without him even noticing it. "Yes," he said, "this is what I want." Victoria's voice softened slightly, not kinder, just resigned. "Then, I hope you find what you're looking for." "I already did," he said simply. When he returned inside, Elena stood near the kitchen, drying her hands. She had clearly overheard enough to understand. "You really did it," she said, voice thick with disbelief. "You walked away from everything." "No," he said, stepping closer. "I walked toward something." She covered her mouth, tears rising again, but not from sorrow this time. Dr. Chin stopped by that afternoon for a final check on Lucas. After listening to his breathing and nodding with satisfaction, she turned to James with a look that was half amusement, half triumph. "Your heart's healthier than when I last examined you," she said. "And considering the night you've had, that's miraculous." Elena stifled a laugh. James raised an eyebrow. "What does that mean?" "It means," Dr. Chin said, packing her tools, "whatever stress you think this family brings, it's doing the opposite." After she left, The cabin fell into a warm evening hush. The children were asleep. The world outside glowed soft and pale. Elena stepped onto the porch, blanket around her shoulders, watching the stars shimmer above the dark silhouettes of the trees. James joined her quietly, leaning on the railing beside her. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, he turned to her. "There's something I want to say," he whispered. She looked at him, expecting a confession or another reassurance. But he took a step back, breath shaking slightly, and lowered himself onto one knee. Her eyes widened, breath catching. He didn't have a ring. He didn't have a plan. He didn't have anything except the truth that had been tearing out of him since the moment he realized she was leaving. "Elena," he said softly, "I spent 40 years building a life that almost killed me. A life full of noise, but empty where it mattered." Her hand flew to her mouth. "And then you walked into it. Uninvited, unplanned, impossible." His voice cracked, and suddenly I could breathe again. A tear slipped down her cheek. "I don't want perfect," he continued. "I want mornings with burned pancakes. I want Daniel's drawings taped all over the fridge. I want Lucas asking if I'm staying for dinner. I want Sophia calling me Dada by accident. I want to grow old watching our garden bloom." He swallowed, eyes full and unguarded. "Marry me. Not because it makes sense, but because nothing in my life has ever made more sense." Elena let out a breath that sounded like a sob, then a laugh, then both tangled together. She dropped to her knees in front of him, tears streaming freely. "Yes," she whispered, voice trembling. "Yes, absolutely yes." He pulled her into his arms as the stars looked on, silent witnesses to a future neither of them had believed they deserved. Word of the engagement spread quickly, mostly because Thomas announced it to the entire village before breakfast the next morning. By noon, half the community had shown up to offer help, gifts, and unsolicited wedding advice. The ceremony took place a week later in the village hall, a small wooden building that smelled faintly of pine and old books. Strings of mismatched lights hung from the rafters. Someone had brought wildflowers. Someone else a homemade cake that immediately began melting because it was placed too close to the wood stove. Nothing went smoothly. Sophia cried the moment Elena walked down the aisle. Daniel dropped the rings and dove under 4 chairs to retrieve them. Lucas tripped over his shoelaces during the vows. Thomas mispronounced James's name 3 times while officiating. It was chaos. Glorious, imperfect chaos. And it was perfect. When James and Elena kissed, the room erupted with cheers that shook the wooden walls, laughter echoing like warm thunder. That night, they returned to the cabin, not as strangers, not as temporary housemates, but as a family bound by choice, by love, by survival, by the quiet miracle of finding each other in the ruins of their old lives. 6 months later, the cabin looked reborn. Curtains danced in the morning breeze. Kids' boots lined the porch in a row. The garden overflowed with vegetables. A curious cat that Daniel had adopted followed James everywhere, despite James insisting repeatedly that he was not a cat person. Inside, the sounds of life filled every corner. The clang of a skillet, Sophia's giggles, Daniel sketching by the fireplace, Lucas pushing a toy truck across the floor like a tiny protector on patrol. James entered the kitchen holding a letter, official, embossed, crisp. "It's done," he said softly. Elena turned from the stove. "The sale." He nodded. "Everything's finalized." She stepped closer, searching his face. "Any regrets?" He looked around. At the family. At the home. At the life he never expected but now couldn't imagine living without. "Not one," he said. Before she could respond, Daniel and Lucas burst into the room at full speed. "Daddy, come eat." James froze. The world around him softened. Blurred. Warmed. "Daddy." The word hit him like sunlight after a long winter. His throat tightened. His eyes burned. He couldn't speak, not immediately. He could only kneel as the boys collided into him, arms thrown around his neck, small hands gripping him like he was theirs. Elena's soft footsteps approached. When he looked up, she smiled, a quiet, knowing smile, and took his hand. Then she guided it gently to rest on her stomach. He inhaled sharply. She nodded, tears sparkling. Surprise. In 7 months. He rose in one breath and lifted her, spinning her carefully as she laughed, both of them crying, both holding on as if the world had just cracked open into something miraculous. When he set her down, their foreheads touched. "Thank you for choosing to stay," he whispered. Elena cupped his face, her voice tender and sure. "Thank you for giving me a reason to." Breakfast turned into laughter-filled chaos. Sophia stole berries. Daniel presented a new drawing. This one a family of 6, standing under a bright sun. Lucas sat beside James, leaning into him with trust that felt like a gift. James looked around the table, the family he hadn't planned for, the life he hadn't expected, the future growing quietly under Elena's hand, and realized that everything he thought he needed had been nothing compared to this. He had come to the cabin seeking rest, but what he found was something money could never buy. He found belonging. He found purpose. He found love. He found home. And home found him. Thank you for staying with us through this entire journey. If this story touched your heart, make sure you're subscribed. We share powerful true stories like this every single week. And here, you can watch another incredible story that I think you'll love just as much. What did you think of James and Elena's story? Let me know in the comments below. I'll see you in the next one.